Welcome to the Scottish Mountain Bike Gathering 2020. I'm Graeme McLean. I'm the head of developing mountain biking in Scotland. This session here, we're going to be exploring and just generally discussing where we are with mountain biking in terms of probably our more experienced mountain bikers, people who have been into the sport for many years and are looking to have been getting out, going further, going wilder, going more. We now have e-bikes as well coming in as well, which is going to enable more people to go further, to go bigger, and to go further into our wilderness and explore our wider countryside more. We want to open this up as a discussion though. We're wondering, is there going to be issues with this in the future? Do we have a strong set of ethics running through our sport that we have already? Do we need to develop that further? Do we need to have people come into our sport, understand how to behave and look to create a way of a set of ethics for us as a mountain bike community, which then instills back that people who enter a sport understand and how we do. We're looking just to explore this today with some really esteemed guests. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce those guests and if they can give them just themselves a bit of their own knowledge and background and where they come from on this particularly interesting subject. I'm going to go to my right of my screen. I'm going to start with Andy McKenna from GoWhere Scotland. Andy, how are you today?
I was better until you decided to pick on me first, and I was hoping I would get to see how this whole shebang works before I dived in, but I'm great. Let's go for it.
Good. Aye. Do you want to give just give us a little bit of your who you are and where you come from?
Okay. Thanks for the invitation and hello everyone. I've got a chronic memory, so I'm going to be glancing over at some notes just to remind me who I am and what I do. A quick snapshot, I suppose. I've been in and around mountain biking since the 80s actually, and in 2008 that took an evolution. I turned it into my business and I started GoWhere Scotland, mountain bike guiding and holiday experience business, and more recently we've had a real focus on projects around diversity, well-being and inclusion. So we work with people from all over the world and share our passion for Scotland. I suppose in the beginning when I got into mountain biking in the 80s, there wasn't really any kind of ethical philosophy, or I didn't really give a toss about ethics. I just loved the buzz and the adrenaline of these death traps called mountain bikes that they were palming off on us. They were just big wheel BMXs. I mean, it was all about the adrenaline for me. Just as I think every man and woman that gets into mountain biking, they should 100% experience that. But I suppose the longer I did this thing, the more I travelled abroad and making a business out of it over a decade ago, watching the sport grow and evolve and expand into the mainstream. I think this really rammed importance home to me, the need for conversations like today's and action that will hopefully stem from it, and it'll not just be another talking shop. And I suppose for me, how we manage all the development sustainably just plays a massive, it tugs on me personally and as a businessman, how to balance the ethics and profit, I suppose. In terms of our work, trail advocacy is massively important. My wife, business partner, she's on the board of the TBTA, puts about 150 hours voluntarily into that every year. Our guides, our team, they're all champions of trail maintenance on tour or in their local area. And we also see real value in our community relationships, our liaison role with all the areas and businesses we work with. We've been riding around Scotland for 30 plus years, so you build up a lot of friendships and they stick with the business as that has evolved. We've got a financial commitment to trail advocacy. A percentage of our turnover goes into at least 2 environmental or trail advocacy organisations each year. We're big on encouraging public transport use amongst our clientele. I've probably said plenty, really. I'm going to shut up for a bit.
No, that's a great introduction, Andy, and it's great to have you on the panel. Bridget, could you just come into yourself, just from you, a bit of introduction to NatureScot and also your role within NatureScot?
Yeah, sure. Afternoon, everybody. Yeah, my name's Bridget Jones. I work for NatureScot, formerly known as Scottish Natural Heritage. Just rebranded there in the summer. My role with NatureScot is I'm strategic paths and projects manager. So I've got a main focus on delivering improvements to the paths and access networks, mostly at kind of strategic level, so sort of longer distance routes. We've got a particular focus on Scotland's great trails, but I'll talk about that in a little bit. Like Andy, I seem to have been around for quite a while as well, and definitely 30 years plus, which is very, very scary, and seen access and recreation change over those decades. In terms of accessibility to the outdoors and recreational opportunities as well. In particular, involved in the access legislation appearing and being implemented. I worked with Loch Lomond and Trossachs National Park when it was established, and again, so another mechanism for getting people into the outdoors. And I think our role as sort of the public sector, which is where I've largely worked, has been in encouraging people into the outdoors, getting all the benefits from it, encouraging responsible, respectful behaviour whilst out there enjoying things, protecting the environment, but also looking at all the sort of knock-on benefits that brings in terms of health and well-being, economic benefit through tourism and business development, and of course working with very much local communities and in partnership to do things together collaboratively. And hopefully, reap the benefits quite widely. In terms of SGT, Scotland's Great Trails, has been a particular focus for us of late. We are doing a bit of a review in terms of that. Many of those routes you'll be familiar with, West Highland Ways, Great Glen Way, some of the smaller routes in there, Arran Coastal Path, Cateran Trail, and so on. They were mainly designed around walking opportunities. That seemed to be the thing back in the 80s. It was long distance walking routes, but with the advent of legislation broadening opportunities for anybody in sort of non-motorized activity, including getting out on mountain bikes, horse riding, whatever, it's meant that that kind of demand, that opportunity to get people into the outdoors has opened up, broadened out. We're currently doing a bit of an internal review of what the SGTs look like, and what's changed over the last 10 years or so, and what the opportunities are in the future. And what's of particular relevance, I think, for this conversation is around about the development in sort of gravel biking, potential for multi-day routes, encouraging more entry-level biking opportunities, really keen on that connecting people with the outdoors and nature, and of course e-bikes and e-bike development and what that opens up in terms of opportunities, but also there's some potential impacts and things to manage in there as well. So the ethics associated with that recreational enjoyment and getting people out there are key, and our primary role as the government's advisory agency is in terms of the Scottish Outdoor Access Code, and as I said at the beginning, encouraging people to get out there, but to do so responsibly.
Thanks so much, Bridget. And Tommy, can you give us a bit about your background as well?
Yeah, well, I certainly feel like I've not been around as everyone else, because I first started riding in the 90s. And at that point, I think it was still a niche sport. And I think at that point, we had a culture much closer to BMX rather than to skiing, which I think is where we're going now. And I sort of always joke that I was brought up on a diet of Dirt magazine for breakfast and repairing square taper cranks for dinner. Anybody who used to do a jump with those. But, my viewpoints have changed over the last 20 years. I've seen the growth of the sport. I've started moving out of racing downhill and being in trail centres to moving into wilder areas. And I'm quite keen to explore how mountain biking can play a role to have economic benefits, social inclusion, whether there's a way we can actually benefit the environment. And one thing that my business increasingly does is work with interagencies such as the Environment Agency, the National Park, to see how we can develop sustainable mountain biking solutions in wilder areas, primarily in England rather than Scotland, where I know we have a different set of laws governing that. And yeah, that's kind of my main interest, is where I'm at now.
Great, thanks, Tommy. And great, Davie, great to have you here as well. Can you give a bit of a background to yourself, Mountaineering Scotland, and your role within it?
Sure, thanks, Graeme. I'm Davie Black. I'm the Access and Conservation Officer for Mountaineering Scotland. I have been around for a bit as well. I keep saying to folk, yeah, I've been in this business 20 years, but I finally realised I've been saying that for a good number of years now, so it's more than that. I've been involved in campaigning for outdoor access. By training, I'm an ecologist, wildlife conservationist, surveys and all that sort of things. I just love being out in the outdoors. Hill walking's my thing. I can't say I'm a biker. I'm a hill walker, but probably better described as a stravager. Show me a path and I'll walk off it and find somewhere more interesting to go. That's where I come from in my background. But for Mountaineering Scotland, we've got a sort of ethics. It's the ethics of outdoor recreation and environmental protection. We've got nearly 15,000 members in Mountaineering Scotland. We were established 50 years ago this year, so we're celebrating our 50th birthday. 50 years ago by the Association of Scottish Climbing Clubs. So we're very much led by volunteers, with the clubs being an essential part of that. And we encourage the participation and the sort of progression in mountaineering activities. That's promoting safety and skills, and campaigning to safeguard the access rights and responsibilities all in Scotland's upland environment. Our ethos within Mountaineering Scotland is self-reliance and self-regulation, really. So our work involves the encouragement of safe practice in the hills and crags. And it's by helping people be safe on the mountains, not making the mountains safe for people. I think that's an important point to make. It's getting that the mental attitude that you're in this wild environment and you need to look after yourself. So that's the self-reliance side of things in there. So the naturalness and the wild qualities of the hill country is important to us. And we try to promote the understanding of the mountain environment and foster the awareness of the impacts of our activities, as well as personal safety. Very strong in protecting the rights of access to the uplands, and just as strong on encouraging the responsible behaviour that comes with those rights set out in the Outdoor Access Code, really. We like to campaign on the conservation of the mountain environment, and we've got a conservation strategy that guides our view of landscape and wildlife and how people interact with that, because people are important. It's not just that the environment's out there by itself. We are part of it and we interact with it and we can change it. And I think it's important to say we're not anti-development in the uplands. It's more a question of how things are done, and if they work with the green of nature and support natural solutions to climate and biodiversity crisis. We also engage with other outdoor recreational activities. And I said I'm a walker myself, but people are not singular in their pursuits, but they engage in a range of activities. We had a member survey recently, and it showed that about 30% of the respondents to that survey regularly cycle, both road and mountain biking, and around another 10% go kayaking. So we don't live in silos of walkers, bikers, or whatever. Everybody does a wee bit of something else. So I think that's quite an important point to sort of pick up on. So we're part of a community of interest in outdoor recreation as a whole. A diverse community, and not all are members of our organisation, but we all have an impact on shared space, and it's how you communicate, or how we communicate with the people who are not necessarily picking up through our membership what's going on. Regarding outdoor recreational matters, a big one for us, especially with respect to landowners, is erosion of upland routes to summits. It can be difficult to get public funding to maintain and repair these sections of routes suffering from the cumulative impact of footfall over years. The funds are available for access, but the criteria to access these funds are more suited to the path construction in lowland areas. So maintaining drainage to prevent erosion and repairing popular routes to protect the plants and soil, more in the sphere of environmental protection than in encouraging public access, I would think. I think that there's more people going hill walking now than there was in the past. Certainly Monroe bagging and Corbett bagging has gained in popularity. I'm not a bagger myself. The thing I like to collect is sources of rivers rather than kicking the cairn. You can find some fantastic places if you just follow burns right up to the very tops in there. So it's when you go and you pick it up in the Monroe baggy and such like, it tends to be associated with a focus on a particular street of hill paths. So you're getting lots of people going over the same ground over and over again in there. And I think Scottish Outdoor Access Code, it's 15 years old this year. And there's a survey done, people in Scotland, people in nature survey, and it was about under 50% of the people surveyed in that survey had an awareness of the Outdoor Access Code, but that is knowing that it exists. Understanding can be a different matter. And I think the search for local recreation opportunities this summer after the COVID-19 lockdown has demonstrated that there's still a fair bit of understanding of responsible behaviour to encourage. So I'm looking forward to a discussion here to try and tease out the strands of where the sort of where shared use and how we can actually sort of minimise our impact can come from.
Yeah, I guess that's quite a useful place to start as well. And I'm going to start with Tommy or Andy, and they can fight amongst themselves who goes first. But just from their perspective, just what do you think that where are we currently with mountain bikers understanding of some of those kind of how to access some of our wilder environments in a sustainable way? Where are we currently, and is there a sort of ethical thought or process going through our minds as we're doing that, and where do you think we are currently with that? So Tommy or Andy? Tommy first, actually, because Andy spoke first last time and he gave me stick for it.
Yeah, well, one thing I would like to raise is as a bit of background on this is that I think over the last few years we've seen a big expansion, people seeking wilder spaces, but I also think we've had a generation of riders who've been brought up in quite a controlled and free to use and maintained environment of trail centres, and that's a completely different riding experience to being on a mountain plateau. And I think somehow we've lost a little bit of disconnect between transitioning from the trail centre into these wilder environments and how we have to adjust our riding and how we respect these environments. And I don't think that's the fault of the riders necessarily. And I think it's important that we make the most of the Land Reform Act 2003, but I also think we need to imbue a culture of how we behave in these mountain environments, because I don't think there's bad intention. I just think there's possibly a little bit of lack of education there and a higher cumulative effect of more people seeking to do it now.
I think Tommy's hit the nail on the head, but there's also the aspect of the entry level. I'm going to sound again like a right old codger, but in the 80s we were just crash test dummies for some really brutal products that were hitting the market. Now, for a mountain biker in 2020 to their first foray into the sport, the bikes, the clothing, the componentry, the technological advances, the digital technology in terms of accessing information about where to ride, it's phenomenal. But it's created a culture and an appetite. It's created a new norm. My entry point was, if I didn't drown in a bog, I did a good day out on a bike. That's not the expectation currently.
And I completely agree with that. Technology's advances, and in terms of how we interact with that, Andy, what are you seeing? You obviously, you and your guides spend a lot of time out in the hills in Scotland. How do you see people, and mountain bikers in particular, kind of interacting with those wild places? Is it mostly in a respectful way? Is there pockets of kind of not bad behaviour, but is there pockets of where we could do better as well?
Mountain biking, great question, Graeme. Mountain biking's it's just a microcosm of humanity, isn't it? So there's lots and lots of phenomenal people, and there's some idiots. So it doesn't matter whether it's mountain bikes, skis, a horse, walking boots. You're going to have some folk that they could be problematic. It might not just be a kind of nature aspect. They might simply not know. I think we've got a great opportunity not to educate, because that sounds so pious, but we can help nudge people in so many great directions in terms of how they interact with the environment. And as a tour operator, our guides they take pride in the fact that, you know, we can ride phenomenal locations, but we can help them understand about why these environments are what they are and that they're fragile, and we want to preserve them. So we've got a great opportunity to help steer people, but you know, tour operators are only a tiny drop in the ocean. We need as a mountain biking community, or folk that do know the score, to find ways of working together and getting the message out.
And Davie as well, I mean, I think you're completely right in your introduction, is that we've got a little bit of a danger of thinking of ourselves as mountaineers, mountain bikers, like that, and we put everybody in silos, and people are a lot more mixed and fluid and will interact with different sports at different times, for sure. But I guess, I mean, I think we're now also seeing, looking at sort of statistics that I've seen coming through, with double the numbers that we normally have on the likes of Loch Lomond. I think we're definitely seeing at trail centres and in other spaces a lot more mountain bikers up. And do you see, or do you foresee any kind of issues of groups clashing in sometimes environments where we've never really had that before?
That's a good question. Yeah, I think it's the shared use of hill paths is a new area for us all, for bikers and for walkers. Most folk are tolerant and respectful of each other, to be honest. I think some people dislike fast bikes and narrow hill paths because they're not used to it. It's something you don't see very often. For years, it's mostly been walkers. Bikes and horses are something you get lowered down. When you go up onto the higher tops, it's mostly just walkers that you'll see up there. With the advances in technology, as has been said there, you can go much further with a bike now than you could do in the past, and people are doing that. And I think it's that novelty effect, like, oh my gosh, what they're doing here, they're moving in a different way as well. It's there's a skill and expertise in riding the bike. There's also an expectation in the people in the hill too. And one of the things I think we look at is it's the cumulative impact of these things. It's not just one person, and you can actually minimise your impact and you're fine. But if you're doing it again and again, and that's something that people come across, as more and more people come across in here, it's how you negotiate those spaces. I do think the Scottish Outdoor Access Code needs to have a look at this, because if you look at cycling and people, the Outdoor Access Code says if a cyclist meets a walker, then the cyclist should dismount on a narrow path. The cyclist should dismount and walk past them. That's just not going to happen on a hill path. There's just no way you're going to manage that. So I think there has to be a wee bit of discussion of how we negotiate use, multi-use of these narrow paths in the future. So this is an ideal opportunity to discuss these sort of things and actually find, how do we work these sort of things? How do we get that mindset to say, I'm not in a plantation here on a really fast track. I'm actually on a shared use path. Therefore, I need to change my mental attitude to how I ride the bike. But also walkers need to say and accept the fact that, yeah, bikes are up here as well. So I need to be aware that I may come here. It may not be able to stop in time. So I should be able to try and deal with the situations that come. So it's a learning experience for all the people, I think, on these hill paths.
And Bridget, does that... Whoa, feedback. Oh, no, that seems better now. I was getting like wave of feedback into that. But yeah, Bridget, does that echo your experiences as well and things as well? And I guess in relation to the access code, 15 years old, things have moved a long way in mountain biking in the last 15 years and things as well. Is there a need for us to look at that at all as well, I think, or consider things?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the main principles of the code still stand strong. I think there's that kind of, respect for other users and, caring for the environment and so on. So I think, the basic principles are there. I think inevitably there's elements of the detail that could be kind of updated. I think that's probably more in, supplementary or tailored advice that works for your audience. So I think, as was pointed out, if we've got an audience of either new to the sport or new to the recreation, particularly as I believe that bike sales are up, as you were saying earlier, centres are experiencing increased levels of use, which is great to hear. So I think we've probably got an audience there that maybe haven't heard the messages before, and we've got to do a bit more sort of tailoring of those. And then there's possibly those that are sort of transitioning from centre-based biking to being into sort of wilder areas. And again, probably in most cases are receptive to you know, some guidance, some advice on just maybe some common sense actions they can do to sort of help minimize impacts and so on. So I think we're in a good place in that respect. I think, though, Davie's point about, you know, bikes getting into, you know, going further, certainly with, you know, e-bike potential, you can get that bit further. And those that are out walking on the hill aren't necessarily used to seeing the bikes out there. What might have been a novelty, you know, over the last decade or 2 decades or so might now become more of a regular occurrence. And it's getting people used to that. And in Scotland, it is very much about respecting each other and shared use. It's shared use, not one trumping the other at all. And I think that in biking, there's always a little bit of a risk because it's a big lump of metal. It's a bike, and it's got, you know, the wheels churn round and they make marks and so on. And you can very quickly be, you know, accused of being in the wrong place. You shouldn't be here, causing too much damage. When in fact the reality is that, you know, most of our upland path erosion has been caused by feet and footwear over the decades. So, you know, there's room for everybody. It's just being sort of respectful of each other's right to be there, and, you know, using opportunities to encourage how you can do that responsibly, and, you know, get out there and enjoy Scotland's fantastic countryside and nature.
On mute. Yeah, I guess kind of relating into that as well. I just wondered as well if kind of Andy and Tommy think as well. Is there places that you think that we shouldn't be going on bikes? Is there spaces into that we need to be kind of more mindful of? And that might not be that might be more nuanced than an absolute no. Like, we shouldn't be going there. It might be we shouldn't be going there at this time of year. We shouldn't be going there on this day. It could be in this type of weather and these type of ground conditions. I'd allow that level of nuance to come into your answer as well, because I think my view is it probably needs that. But I'd like to hear your views on that as well, Andy and Tommy. Tommy, no, who's first last time? I'll go Andy first this time again. So, Andy.
Graeme, you've pretty much answered the question at the same time. You've basically saved me a breath, but the reality is that I don't think that we're anywhere near a situation where we can start, you know, stopping people from going to any one location. But wouldn't it be incredible if we could evolve a culture, almost like a natural trail amnesty? The infrastructure such, the footprint is big enough that when the trail amnesty kicks in and we say, look, this needs 3-4 months to regenerate, everybody leave off X, Y, and Z, locations, destinations, trail centres, whatever, are there and right for the enjoying. And if we had some level of monitoring and a large enough, you know, infrastructure to move people about and share the load. But, you know, I'm all up for everything from mandatory trail maintenance conscription, you know. I think that the pace of change and the groundswell, literally the landscape in certain environments can't absorb the traffic, and we need to figure out a way of spreading the load and maintaining the infrastructure that we have whilst building the resource, the capacity.
And Tommy, do you want to come in and any other thoughts there as well? Andy's given a good answer there enough. It's a hard one to follow. Like.
Yeah, I think Andy's pretty much nailed it. But one thing I do think, we do have some trail amnesties, which is a new phrase to me, down here in Northumberland, and that might be because of ground nesting birds, or it might be sensitive habitat, or wherever. And but one thing that we really lack is that the communication on that, I think, has to come from the community itself. That can occasionally be top-down heavy. And the way it's portrayed is often, you can't ride here, and there's no significant reasoning for that. And of course, then you get attention because people go and ride there anyway, because you know, they don't understand that a curlew might be fledgling or whatever, and they might not even be interested. So it's kind of building that culture of responsibility and peer from your peer group as well, saying actually, you know, if we work together, we do this, actually it might help us get access to build another trail because we've shown that we're responsible to have that amnesty. So it's kind of taking a step back and looking at the bigger picture for me, into how we get access and becoming a user group that is actually an asset to land managers and to nature, rather than through kind of blissful ignorance occasionally a hindrance. But I don't think that falls always at mountain bikers' doors. I think that's lack of collaboration between land managers, landowners, and mountain biking groups.
Yeah, Davie, in you come. Yeah, I was going to bring you in. Yeah.
That's it's good points that you've both raised there. That's the self-regulation aspect which I'd mentioned earlier kicking in. We've got a similar sort of situation arising with climbing and nesting birds, especially protected birds, peregrines, golden eagles and such like. There's plenty of climbing crags in Scotland, but in some cases, at some times of the year, you'll find that climbing routes tend to be the favoured spot of a protected bird of prey sitting in there. And of course, they're protected by law, and it's to keep the birds safe and also to keep the climbers safe that we engage in sort of voluntary restrictions on certain crags and certain routes in the crags. We've got a system of alerts on our website in which we have noticed of where most of these crags are, where the birds habitually nest on particular routes. And we try to show, ask for voluntary restrictions there. So it has to be proportionate, I think, for climbers to buy into it. So it has to be time limited. When are we actually prospecting to nest in there, starting nesting, saving the eggs from getting cold, saving the fledglings from getting cold as well if to scare off the adults. So you're looking at a voluntary restriction from, say, March through to the end of July on certain crags. And it's not just even on the whole crag. Sometimes the peregrines especially, they can tolerate a bit of disturbance, and if they're in, say, the west end of the crag, and you've got roots in the east end of the crag, and there's a buttress in the middle, you can climb on that east side okay. So it's not as if there's a blanket sort of prohibition on these sort of things. It's proportionate to the impact of the activity on the sensitivity of the bird itself. So I get updates from the raptor monitoring groups to say what's happening where. We've got a system of alerts. We've got a traffic light system where sort of be aware there's birds prospecting around the area, putting an amber alert up in there. Oh, they're nesting now, it's red. Oh, they didn't nest, it failed, that's green again, you can climb in there. So we encourage climbers to check on our website to see where this sort of real-time sort of update on where the nesting is. And it seems to be reasonably workable. There are occasionally instances when it happens. You know, people don't read the website, they don't know it's there. But climbers buy into this. So this sort of voluntary self-regulation is, I think, a very good way of going. That sort of approach to say, we'll back off for a bit for a certain amount of time. There's plenty of other places to go. If you can get alternatives to go elsewhere, it seems to work. And that gives a good feeling to the other parts of civic society to show that, yeah, responsible people are not mad people climbing about all over the place or cycling about all over the place. They're actually thinking about what we're doing. So I would certainly sort of endorse that sort of self-regulation, sort of trail amnesty type of thing. I think it can work.
I'm just going to ask you another question on that, Davie, as well, for bringing others on this as well. I mean, I think that the nesting birds one is quite a it's not I'm using the wrong word here, but it's quite a kind of distinct, it's quite not obvious, but it's a kind of like, do this and it's wrong. Whereas I think trail amnesty and things as well is it's a spectrum as well, isn't it? I mean, there's some trails that are obviously just a complete bog and you're going to really ruin it if you go through there, through to a really hardcore purpose-built, almost road-like surface. And at which point does that become more, at which point does it become unsustainable? At which point are we really doing significant damage that it's ruining the place that we're in? And I just wonder, like that's an example from mountain biking, and I'll maybe come back to that and ask Tommy and Andy their thoughts on where in that spectrum, if any, that we should be looking to act as a community or consider what we do with that as a community. But I just wondered if there is ones that are probably more of a spectrum issue and that you have within mountaineering. There and how that's managed or how it's managed even through ethics or communication.
Yeah, I think from hill walking to go, when you get into Munros and Corbett's, if you want to get to the summits, you'll find there's the topography tends to define the route you take to get to your destination, and there will be bits which become a wee bit boggy, and the more you walk on them, the boggier they get, and the more folk walk around them, and you spread it, and that way you can actually impact on the environment quite a bit. Now, you think the mountains are quite robust and sturdy things, been there for eons, ages, but actually the processes and the plants that grow on them and the animals that grow on that work on these plants as well, they can be quite fragile. I mean, they live in pretty horrendous conditions a lot of the time, but they're very slow growing, and damage to them can take quite some time for them to recover. So yes, how we manage where we walk is an issue, and footpath repair is quite a big thing. I've seen some horrendous footpath repairs in my time. They've been really, really insensitively done. And there's others which are absolutely fantastic. And I think the Outdoor Access Trust for Scotland is doing some really good work on trail restoration work. So I think it's not just the damage, and I think there's something in there, but how do we maintain this? It's environmental protection. And how do we maintain this environment? And finding the money to do it is the hard bit. You can identify where the spots are, and you can identify where there's pinch points, and say, you need to do something there. Getting the money to do that is quite difficult, because to get it from the rural development funding, they've got a formula, and it's worked on a path. For digging a path, surfacing a path, there's a certain price per linear metre that you can work to. If you're in an upland area, it may just require a bit of drainage, a couple of water bars in there, dig a shuck along the side to drain the water off. It might actually involve some really expensive and difficult stone pitching. So there's not a standard one-size-fits-all price you can put onto upland path repair. So having a bit of flexibility and a source of funding to be able to repair paths, I think is quite important, as well as trying to sort of avoid it. I mean, you're not able to avoid it because that's where people go. It's the desire line. And it's how do you manage the people going through these particular areas? It's a hard bit. So yeah, funding is something that's been going on for quite some time. No solutions yet. Bridget might have some ideas on that one, but I keep plugging away for more money for upland hill paths.
Yeah, Bridget, do you want? I mean, not to put you on the spot and ask when the money's coming from NatureScot or everything with this as well. But do you think? I mean, that is going to be, I guess, what would be useful would be to understand a little bit of why funding might be challenging for this kind of thing as well, and any work that we might be able to do to help make good arguments towards this.
Yeah, I'll probably pick up. Well, I'll cover a couple of things, because one, I think, kind of just, if I can mention briefly, going back to sort of path amnesty type thing and closure thing, is that yeah, that might work in certain circumstances, and resting. Perhaps something that's more along a kind of more informal route that's you've maybe not eroded down too far, but you can, leaving it for a couple of years might, restore the vegetation back or something like that. But what I suspect is really the issue is once you reach the point of no return, where you are going to have some sort of intervention to address either erosion issues or drainage, surfacing, bleeding, or whatever. And that, of course, leads us on to, right, how do you do that? And yeah, mountain biking's got a really good history of volunteer work and effort on trail repair and maintenance and so on, which is a really great starting point. But then you do get to the point where you perhaps do need more capital money to tackle those bigger erosion issues, and that will often be combined with other user groups. So you might be linked in with mountaineering pressure, hill walking pressure, and so on. Yeah, being put on the spot. Yeah, I mean, we're constantly looking at ways to pull funding packages together to support path improvements, restoration and development, and so on. And in Scotland, that comes in many forms, including through agricultural funding, which of course we're in a bit of a flux at the moment as we go into Brexit and come out the other side. And Scotland sets up its next rural development programme and what that might look like. It's a bit down the line. We're looking at post-2024 for the start of new programmes. And at the moment, we're just working through transition arrangements where we might get money to help with some path repair work. And then, of course, there's all sorts of other potential mechanisms as part of green recovery. And I say it's green recovery in its broadest terms, both in tackling climate change, but also the consequences of being in a global pandemic, you know, pretty much all of this year, and the impacts that's had on people, including their well-being, obviously. So I think there's opportunities there, and I guess from, you know, public sector perspective, we're making the case, and that's why it's important we're at events like this, because it's where we get to hear, you know, the real stories, you know, what's going on, what's important, what are the priorities, and that helps inform, you know, my decisions in writing advice and policy advice and recommendations and so on. So yeah, keep going with those strong messages, and you know, we will make a difference.
Yeah, and I think Tommy as well, you've been kind of investigating about this through down in Northumberland. Is that right? Is that something you can expand on?
Yeah, we've been looking at working with landowners in the uplands, particularly the uplands, for the new environmental land management subsidy, which is in its pilot stage at the minute, which is DEFRA funded, and we're looking at that for the provision of recreation paths and repair. We're also tying that into moving some landowners into higher tier environmental lands management subsidy schemes. So that could be tree planting, that could be peat bog restoration. And what we're doing as a charity is facilitating that with a benefit in kind of volunteer labour. So it doesn't always have to be hard cash. There can be a benefit in kind. And one thing I would like to add is I think I would like to see, I think currently the main influence for a lot of mountain bikers comes from brands. So the biggest brands in mountain biking, I would like to see them invest more in trail maintenance, trail infrastructure, building a culture, because not only is it the right thing to do, I actually think it's good for their business, because without trails and without an environment, they don't actually have a business. If there are no paths for us to ride or no trails for us to ride. So I think that's really important.
And I guess, I mean, we've seen a good example of that earlier on in the session, where we looked at sort of sustainable trail models, and we brought in Santa Cruz with pay dirt as well. You know, in the previous conference, we featured Fonnie Cock from Specialised as well with the soil searching bit. But do you see more of that? Do you think there is a momentum from the industry to get involved in this and get involved in it? I guess also sort of spreading good messages as well as rad riding.
Yeah, I think that is growing. But one of the things that I'm always aware of is that you know, there might be 300 people in here, and Pink Mike might get 100,000 visitors a day, and 200,000 people might go on Instagram a day. But I actually think a key touch point for a lot of mountain bikers is they'll get their bike out of the box and we never see them again. They're just happy to ride their bike. So it's how do we connect with them at that touch point? And I think that's where the brands can really have an impact, whether that's a cool booklet or a zine or something that pushes a culture of responsibility, directs them to their local club. I'd like to see that trialed and explored. But I do think there is a growing momentum towards advocacy from some of the big brands. And like you mentioned, Seb and Fanny and Kotick. And you know, there are various groups working with brands to kind of help facilitate that.
That's good. And Andy, in your experience as well, do you think this is something that the industry are becoming more aware of and are more likely to act on? And you know, ideas like Tommy said, straight out of the box, straight into the hand, always got the same message going through it of responsibility and
I think
knowledge sharing.
I think the industry's kind of gone from a situation where it was really good PR, it was really good marketing. There's still a touch of that, but you know, if you're savvy enough, and sometimes you don't really need to be, you can sniff that out. I'd say that already we're starting to see this side of the industry mature slightly. There is genuine commitment, not just you know, tokenistic commitment towards trail advocacy globally. I've been around it 30 plus years. I've never seen this level of engagement. I've never known of conversations like the one we're having right now. There's lots and lots to do. For the sensitive environments you were speaking about earlier are concerned, the demand and pace, the appetite to get into the wild is going to be even more so after COVID. We've got the World Champs in 2023. I think we need to set a bit of a hierarchy, a priority of where are the sensitivities and really keep pushing and working to do collaborative work on the trails, because the technology is just so incredible. Some of these more sensitive spots in Scotland just can't take as much traffic, and we need other locations to go and ride and enjoy. But I definitely feel, more than ever, everyone's listening, everyone's starting to get on the same page. And I think with the explosion of newbies into the activity, now the time is right for tour operators, the tour industry, coaches, guides, all to have a voice here.
And Davie as well, do you see this in other mountaineering disciplines as well, and things as well? Does the industry get behind responsible messaging? And it seems to me that some, although I think it has grown in mountain biking, but I think there is certainly brands in mountaineering that I'm aware of, so from Patagonia to Norano in Norway, who really take great pride in themselves being seen as kind of ecologically friendly. And I think it's improving in mountain biking, but not through it's there yet. And do you think that makes a difference to the culture in other parts of mountain sports?
I think it does. It creates a sort of a society in which you know that your kit's going to be ethically sourced, but there's stuff that we can do as well, because not every organisation or every supplier does that sort of corporate social responsibility side of things. I mean, you just have to look at the issue over wild camping we've had this summer, where folk were buying tents for about 30 quid and sort of festival tents and abandoning them and leaving them behind. There's a personal responsibility as well as this corporate responsibility to come in there. So the kit has to be sort of ethically sourced, as well as what you buy and what you actually do with it. It's a big issue. We're just starting to deal with that ourselves, looking at what's our impact on climate change. What do we do in the mountaineering community that actually creates or exacerbates the situation with the global climate change? A big issue. It's quite hard to deal with. We're feeling our way through there. We've got a group of members who are an advisory group for us looking at this issue. So it's early days, but I think, yeah, there's a mixture of leading from the front, from the supplier side of things, but there's also trying to foster a sort of an ethos of that personal responsibility and thinking, yeah, well, I'm going to make an impact in here. I need to try and reduce my impact. I want to leave as little trace as possible. And it's trying to communicate that sort of the mindset in there. It's not just a question of, yeah, I'm going to go out and enjoy myself and sort of test myself in my machine in the environment. I think I'm having an impact in the environment, and I need to think about how I'm doing this as well.
Can I make sorry to interrupt, can I make a small point before I forget it? I think we've got an incredible scene and an incredible opportunity, but one thing that's not very cool, and I never really used to give a damn about it, but the whole respect and responsibility element of the Scottish Outdoor Access Code, we've got incredible access, but that message, respect and responsibility, needs to be sexed up. It's not just about us old timers. It's something that needs to be embedded in just about every piece of communication and storytelling around mountain biking, certainly where Scotland's concerned, and breeding, a generation. Certainly the Tweed Valley is an incredible bubble for mountain biking. We're seeing kids that already get that. It's not a newbie issue. There's veterans out there that know nothing about respect and responsibility, and there's a huge opportunity there.
Yeah, Tommy, what mean? I guess bringing you up as well, you've got a communication agency as well and doing that, and how do we do that, and how do we sense that? I think what Davie spoke about as well, that sense of personal responsibility. How do we start to get that quite deep within people, and people take real pride in that?
Well, yeah, I think traditionally marketing in mountain biking has been very performance-based. So that's racing the best athletes and so on, the best tech. I do think there's an opportunity for brands, now that we have more people being more vocal, who are also good riders. We should actually be promoting them and sending their message so it becomes imbued, like Andy says, within our culture. It's not something like we feel like we have to do, or it's a chore. It's just something that we do. It becomes the way we behave. And I think that's really important. But I also think that needs to be led by, I hate the term influencers, but the people who can be influential in this sphere. Because like Andy says, it's not sexy, this conversation. It's not fun. But I think it's really important though that, you know, we're engaging people on every level, so that actually they can say, all right, there's my idol, and they're doing it, so therefore it's cool. And I think I'd like to see more money put into that from the brand side, telling those stories, activating those athletes, and putting some input into them. And I also think actually, in the same way that we sponsor athletes and teams, why do we not sponsor advocates to the same level? Why is there not a team of advocates who can go around and do talks and speak to people and go riding with them? I think that could exist as well.
Yeah, no, great points. And I guess that the system is an ecosystem, isn't it? I mean, it needs all of these things to work as well, doesn't it? It needs people at all different levels to influence government, to get the funding into the right things. It needs to have influencers coming in to influencing people's behaviour and do things as well. And I guess kind of thinking about this as well and looking at it, and I see that there's a lot of chat going through this stream as well, and I'm trying to pick up on it whilst follow this as well. This is definitely stretching my TV hosting ability. But I'm just kind of wondering as well, like, you know, we've got good thoughts here. We're looking at kind of creating a culture, and I think part of that creating that culture is starting to have these conversations so that people consider it and bring it into their own practices. But do you think it needs more leadership? Do we have a bigger role to play in doing it and fostering this forward? And is there also maybe agencies such as NatureScot, do they have a bigger role to play within this as well? Maybe go to you for that one, Bridget.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think, you know, to give a bit of background, I mean, our role in terms of the outdoor access code is something we're looking at that at the moment over this winter, really in response to the increase in pressures in the outdoors over the summer, you know, around about, you know, camping issues and fires and, you know, various other bits and pieces around some of the hotspot areas. So, you know, there is work going on as to how to get messages out in a better way. And, you know, it's not folk like me that are doing that. It's, you know, people that are, you know, experts in comms and marketing activity, because they know the latest, you know, ways to do that. And, you know, Tommy's point about, you know, using influencers, that's right in there in social media, because it's a relatively cheap way to get messages out there. You can get a big reach at relatively low cost. And, you know, things have moved on big time since, you know, we last started, you know, ran TV ad campaigns for, you know, for the outdoor access code. So that the ways of doing things are quite different. I think in answer to, yeah, who does it, it has to be a combined effort. It absolutely has to be, because, you know, we can all influence different audiences in different ways. And, you know, we probably reach quite well the kind of, you know, the middle ground folk that are, you know, receptive to messages. But, you know, that, you know, younger generation stuff, you know, our kids are looking at, yeah, YouTube stuff constantly, always looking at, you know, who the next person is telling them about the latest bit of kit and, you know, the latest, you know, everything. And, you know, brands are right in there as influencers, has to be a big part of the sector. So, yeah, combined approach. But yeah, and the other point I think about advocates, you know, getting out there, tying it in more with, you know, maybe with some of the bikeability stuff that goes on in Scotland. You know, there's a lot of good work happening out there already that you could probably tailor perhaps a little bit to focus on, you know, the stuff that we're talking about, the mountain biking activity.
And Davie as well, what kind of role do Mountaineering Scotland have in this within kind of your more traditional sectors of mountaineering and climbing and things? What role do you play in? How does that interact through to the culture that's set there?
I think an example we could use for that recently is litter in the hills. You walk by and you see banana skins. Oh, sorry, banana skins are biodegradable. It's okay, same as orange peel, but it takes years for them to biodegrade in that environment. So even though they're organic and biodegradable, they're still litter. They lie around for quite some time. So we started a campaign called #TagItHame, and we created bags. And to become a member of the Mountaineering Scotland, as part of your membership pack, you get this Tag It Hame bag, your bespoke bag to stick in your rucksack. So you've got it there, picking up, putting your rubbish in there, but also picking up other people's rubbish as well, as long as it's safe, obviously. So you can take up other people's rubbish and take it home and recycle it, bin it, wash your bag, take it out again. It's that sort of the attitude. If we don't pick it up, who will? There's no bin collection in the uplands. So we did that as a very sort of soft campaign, and using it in social media where people were pictured with their bag and picking up litter. So it wasn't organised litter picks, it was doing it during your normal hill walking, climbing activities. And it kicked off really well. It's been surprising. A number of people putting their photos on Facebook, on Twitter, and Instagram. And it's a word of mouth thing. It's showing you this is the acceptable behaviour nowadays, and it's people like you and me that are doing it. It's not coming down from on high. It's people who are out there hill walking, are picking up other people's rubbish because they were too ignorant to pick it up themselves. They're taking it home themselves, and they're doing it a public service. And it's fostering a change in attitude. It becomes the norm to do this sort of thing. So I think there's a role for the community itself to be able to do it from the ground up and show that it can be done. And it doesn't have to be expensive. A simple thing like that, I mean, that's just one example, but it shows you the reach and the impact that it can have.
Can I ask something, Graeme?
Right.
I'm going to be devil's advocate here. Given how much we hear national, governmental and various other public organisations say that mountain biking means to this tiny little country of Scotland, do we as a sector receive a proportionate amount of financial support? Because that to me, you know, we've got engagement at so many phenomenal local, regional, national levels, but have we got the cash? Because a lot of the stuff we're talking about is quite long term.
Is that a question to me, I guess, as well, isn't it? And
I'm not trying to intentionally make you squirm, but it just feels to me that mountain biking as a sector gets an awful lot of good praise, and I'll stick my own neck out here. I'll probably never get another bit of Visit Scotland funding. Well, never did anyway. But that's beside the point. You know, are we getting enough public financial support for this sector? I don't think so.
I think we're telling our story better, Andy, I'd say, and I think that helps us say that we're a success, and I think politicians like to follow successes, so there's part of that. I think we've done well, particularly over the last. I think we had a little hiatus in funding. We did very, very well in the early 2000s with the creation of the trail centres, and then coming in with access code as well. That enshrined a lot of things that I guess I didn't even consider when I was kind of out playing in my hills and my bikes. I didn't even know there was access rights there, but that became law that I had that and to do it. And I think we had funding, and like Bridget said, there was national TV campaigns at that time as well to promote responsible behaviour when the code came in and things as well. And I think, and we had an influx of access officers as well, and at that time as well, we had sort of a lot of people caring for it. And then just over time, I think some of that kind of has dipped down, I think, as well, with some of those general access parts that have dipped down. I think in mountain biking, we've done well. Development Scotland was only set up as a 3-year project back in 2010. It was only set up to last for 3 years, and there'll be a framework to keep that going. We've had to work really hard to keep just a core of a team going, and then worked extremely hard to then get in some fairly awful funding. Apologies to anyone involved in Leader, but it's been really hard work, and we wouldn't be able to do it without the support of Scottish Cycling to do that. But I think that's helped us grow some of the impact that we have and do.
I wasn't aiming at you, Graeme.
No, I know. I guess I'm explaining a bit of where I see it going, Andy, and also I think as well. I think that where we have is using an event like 2023 gives us more profile, so it gives us more opportunity to gives us more profile. I think the work that we're doing around the sort of borderlands growth deal into bike parks and innovation centres potentially to happen, the master planning we're doing in the Highlands, all of that sets ourselves up well for investment into us as well. So I think there's a number of great things happening. I think what we probably need to do though as well is a lot of the things that are coming through this chat is I think we probably do need more industry engagement into some of the issues that we have into things. Getting match funding into stuff is very, very challenging as well, and it would be great to see the industry step forward and look to support more of that, if I'm honest, because that money is very valuable because it can be used both for revenue, for capital, for whatever the industry likes to do it. And we probably don't see enough of that coming through. And also, I think as well, why I hope that this is useful as well, is I hope that the industry and other partners can take it on themselves and go, you know, we'll link in with them, we can take what message they give us, but we're going to sex it up, we're going to change it and make it more appealing because we're used to giving good messages to people that they can digest it and do it. And I hope as well, if we can be joining up on those things, we can make that better. Does that answer your question a bit?
Yeah. I suppose I feel that we... absolutely. I'm just going to leave that one there, Graeme.
No, it's fine. Just switching off of TV host mode to back to my question mode as well. But I think as well. I think communities. I think campaigns can be strong as well. I mean, it's certainly the Tack at Hame one as well is really good. We're really good. We're really pleased. Last year we joined up with Think Winter with Mountaineering Scotland and other bodies as well, and that work we got really good reach on that. And I think we need to do more of those joint campaigns together into the outdoors, and I think we've got Sports Scotland have set us up as a group to do that as well. So I think there's definitely some things there that we can be working on and doing. Where are we going now, guys? Where have I gone? You've thrown me, Andy. I've lost my question thread.
Apologies, you'll never ask me back.
No. I'll always ask you back, Andy. Into that as well. I guess what I'll do, Davie, you look like you've got a hand up to rescue me while I paddle away. Just as well, before I bring you in, and just to help me out as my brain is slowly starting to shrink towards the end of the day, I see there's the chat box in here is going great guns. I'm not following it. If you've got specific questions you want to ask the panelists and things today, can you just pop it on the Q&A as well, folks, and I can pick up on it easier as well. So thanks to delegates in that digital world out there that I can't see, and we do that. And Davie, thanks for saving me. In you come.
I was just going to change the subject slightly on here, and I was going to ask, if you're taking your bike out onto the hills, away from the trails and such like, and you're exploring further into the upland area, you'll be relying a bit on technology to do that, your GPS and all that sort of thing. How many do you know of folk can actually read a map and compass when the wind comes in and the mist comes down and you can't find your way back off the hill?
Andy, what's your take on that?
I'm sorry, Davie. I was busy. I was busy sending Graeme an apology on chat.
It was fine. It was fine. It just threw my question module out on it to switch modes.
I'm sorry. I need to learn better self-discipline. It's never been my forte, as you know.
Or the multitasking. No, Tommy, what's your take on that? Since you were listening.
Yeah, I do think there is a significant proportion of people who know how to read a map in mountain biking and can do it. However, I think like any, and this isn't specific to mountain biking, it's the same cut of any society, technology is so easy now and generally so good that we have become a little bit more reliant on it. And I live in the Cheviot Hills, which is a complete black spot. So we need maps, and GPS will fail. We've had major brand GPS fail there. So I think it's a really good question because I think it's important that we don't get a perception that we're a hassle for mountain rescue, which I think is unfair at times, but I still think that perception exists. I don't think we have any more cases or rescues than any other outdoor activity, but it's just a perception thing. So I think that's something to be aware of as well, that if you're going out into the wild, take a map.
think you're right, Tommy. I think also it's raised the expectations. I think the shift towards the digital technology, the navigational aids, the equipment, and the expectation that a lot of riders are coming at, that they're using Trailfork Strava just as I do, but they're going to particular iconic trails in Scotland, and that has an inevitable consequence for places like Torridon, which I know was spoken about in an earlier session, particularly sensitive locations. So the shift towards digital technology and also the increased expectation that's inevitable, people's levels and what they want from the riding experience and where they can go and the speed and so on, it's having an inevitable consequence, and it's great that we're aware of it, and we're conscious that we need to bring balance.
I've just got a good question come in from Anthony on the chat there, and I guess Anthony's just wondering as well, is that he's saying mountain bikers have been kind of told for years they're doing bad things. We're kind of a little bit of the naughty boys of the outdoors and boys and girls of the outdoors. Do you think that is the case? Do you think that is our perception? And also, does that make it harder for any messages to get across as well? Do you think that? I guess Tommy and Andy again into that one.
Who's on first, Tommy?
Yeah, I think that is. I think the problem is engagement, and I think there's a perception problem. But an old boss used to say, perception is reality, and for a lot of people, their perception of us is what they equate to the reality, even if that's wrong. So it's partly our job to try and change that as well, as difficult that is. But I do think because we've had this perception against us, we probably do have a little bit where we're prepared to dig our heels in now, and almost flip two fingers at times to that messaging. And that's a difficult challenge to overcome. And I think that's why what we're doing right now, having these discussions, is really positive. But I also think we need much more joined up thinking between SNH, between the Environment Agency, between these multi-user groups, so that we're actually engaging with Mountaineering Scotland, we're engaging with the BMC, so that actually we've got that seat at the table and we can influence how people perceive us. That's really important that we don't shy away from that.
Good. Andy, anything to add to? Good answer.
Oh, it's going to sound incredibly cheesy, but it's got me and most of our cheeky guides out of all sorts of potential conflict situations. A massive big smile and engage. If you run into some conflict on the trail, quite often there's a conversation to be had. I think it's really folly for all user groups, whether it's on horseback or on foot or on bike, to go in there with your mind already made up when a pinch point occurs or a bit of conflict, and quite often a big stupid smile and an engaging hello and is enough to actually unpick something. And if you have enough of those conversations like we do, we have almost 300 clients a year. Well, not this year, obviously. It's a lot of conversations and a lot of contact with a lot of different land users, and that's just our tours. And multiply that by all our guides and all the riding days that they have. We have an amazing opportunity to help shape and change views if they need change, and also to help bring newbies along on the same fantastic journey that we're part of. Instead of a top down, just a more participative nudge into doing the right thing.
Good. Yeah, just as we move into the last 5 minutes, just looking for just kind of, I guess, the purpose of this wasn't to have any answers to come forward from today, but just wondered if there's anything that you kind of final points that you've been kind of brewing, mulling over, that you'd like to bring forward, or just a kind of summation of this as well, or anything like to finish with. I will go to Bridget first, if that's okay.
Yeah, it's fine. I think it's been a great conversation, really good range of topics discussed. I think the only thing that I'd sort of scribbled down that I thought I should mention a bit more about is just the importance of co-design for developing messaging and the comm stuff. A co-design approach is the key, and we've just recently been doing some stuff with Young Scott on how to tune the key messages for the outdoor access code, and that's worked really well from us. It just gives a different perspective and keeps it relevant. So co-design will be my parting shot for you, and I think we've got great opportunities to build on the growth in the sport and the activity over the coming decades. Another 30, Andy, hopefully.
Yeah, and Davie?
Yeah, I think my message from this conversation is just to keep talking. It's been great. There's been some good topics raised. It's some been talked all around the houses here. As you say, there's very few answers coming out, but that's a good thing because it means we're getting to know what it is that we need to discuss and find ways towards it. So yeah, keep talking. Let's share stuff in each other's platforms, move things around a bit like that, and yeah, I'm all for it.
Tommy?
Yeah, I think it's been a great discussion. One of the things that I see somebody's just answered in the Q&A is can we discuss environmentalism, and that was something I was going to talk about in our role of mitigating climate change and how we can have a positive impact on that. I think we're out of time, but I also think that's something that as an industry we should start to think about. We've seen trails destroyed in California, we've seen trails destroyed in Yorkshire, we've seen trails destroyed in Italy, and we're very good at coming together to rebuild them. But actually, I think we should be looking at it like, actually, what can we do to mitigate the chance of that happening in the first place? And I do think we can have a role to play within that because we're in the outdoors, we're in environments that can sequester a huge amount of carbon, that can support habitats, and that's something I would like to engage with as well longer term.
Yeah, that would be a really useful conversation as well, wouldn't it? How do we use some of these spaces that we have in a way that benefits recreation as well as the environment as well? I know that that's something we're discussing quite a lot within our team as well at the moment as well, is how can these things be, and I guess back to Bridget's point, how can they be co-designed? It's not just messages that can be co-designed, it's the environment as well, isn't it? So it can be co-designed to benefit as many people and the ecology and the environment as well. But Andy, yeah, before I start waffling.
Right, well, I'm going to try and pull a very complicated thing into 20 seconds. I still think after 30 odd years that it's still, although it's shifting, there's more women getting into the sport, but it's still, relatively speaking, a white middle class male club, for want of a better expression. And we need to embed diversity into this discourse. If we're talking about ethics, it's for everyone. It's got to be for everyone. So diversity, gender, Black and minority ethnic people need to be part of the outdoor access conversation, especially given that COVID's making more of us want to enjoy it. Everybody needs to be in part of that perspective.
Brilliant. Yeah, completely agree, Andy. Completely agree. I think it's came through quite a number of our different sessions throughout today as well, of that as well. And I think that the added diversity as well is sometimes I feel that there's a risk of diversity for diversity's sake rather than actually us talking about the benefits of diversity. And I think there is masses of diversity. I've worked in workplaces where it's been all men and it's been just too much. Like it makes a difference. If you've got gender balance, it makes a difference. It smooths things over. Things work better to me if there is more balance. And I think that's the case with a lot of different things and with a lot of areas of diversity as well, is that balance actually improves things. So it's not just doing it for the sake of it, is to doing it because it actually makes things better, and it makes things your experiences better and your mindset better as well, my personal opinion. But I guess this has been a really a fascinating session to be a part of. I've really enjoyed it myself. It's been educational, plus it's been useful to consider where we can go with this and doing it. And I like Davie says as well, is I think this is good to open this up. is good to start it, and I think it'll be good to keep this going. We'll need to work out how we do that, but I think it's really important that we do. So thank you very much for taking the time today, everybody, to be a part of this session. Thanks all to the delegates for the chat box that's been ringing at the bottom of my screen as well. Hopefully that's helping you, and yeah, we can use this time to have voices heard and do that. And I look forward for this broadcast to go out and more people see this as well. So thank you very much for your time today.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thanks.